These days, there is all sorts of different types of assets who are starting to participate in these markets because you do see that there is benefit of getting your asset pre-qualified for downward regulation, even if you're a renewable producer. And now, because of more controllability that is coming in,
AI-driven intraday strategies fine so far, but whenever it's about ancillary services, frequency reservations, then purely AI might be a bit too much of a long shot.
for almost everything, you have to be more vigilant and careful of the changes because all the market rules change in one place. It impacts everything, the whole trading cycle. So even intraday.
If we would say that the markets before this whole integration was in some sort of steady state, it got an enormous shock. Market participants adjusted and learned. Would you say now that we are now in a steady state, or are we still drifting and learning?
I would say that the more data we have, the more we can learn, really. And that's something we are struggling with in terms of the data transparency. So some things that are good.
Hi, welcome all, and welcome to Time to Talk. Today we have another special guest. We have Priyanka Shinde from Montel. Welcome, Priyanka.
Thank you.
Yeah. Priyanka is market expert at Montel. I'm pretty sure that many of you already know her. Of course, very active on LinkedIn, many online or public endorsement, show-ups, Montel events. You are, of course, an expert on many elements in the short-term physical power markets. Priyanka, can you tell us a bit about how you landed at Montel, your history within energy, of course, your PhD, electrical power systems. Can you walk us through on how did it go, where does the interest come from, and how you became such an expert in your field?
Oh, that's a lot of questions. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's very nice to be here and to talk about my favorite topic, electricity markets. So that's really nice. And yeah, I would call myself as an electricity market geek and enthusiast. And now my official title also calls me an expert. So it's been a journey, I would say. So I've been in this topic for several years, like 8 years almost, or a bit more than that. So I also did my PhD, as you mentioned, in the same topic of electricity markets, focusing a lot on short-term electricity markets and focusing every like the timeline from ancillary services to day ahead, intraday balancing markets. And you like once you get deeper into these topics, there's just so much one can do. You start to realize that there are opportunities from optimization point of view, from forecasting point of view. Data is a question, insights, analysis. So it's everything, and it's also being able to explain all of these things. So I feel like these are the things that really I find very interesting, and that's been also the reason why I've been like so much sticking to this topic from the very beginning of my PhD, where I first landed into this PhD position and then developed my skills along these lines and then got deeper into it. And I found it very engaging. And the most interesting thing is that the market also developed along those years. So if you go back in time, if you look at the liquidity in the intraday markets from 2018, for example, and it has just grown. So there have been new challenges that have been coming in, but also more opportunities, right? So it's always been very engaging, and the type of challenges you would face are also always evolving. Now with more algorithmic trading coming in, with more AI, different market rules, more pan-European projects, so more integration across Europe. That is like opening up the markets to access to so many different countries. So your asset might be, let's say, in Sweden, but you're able to trade with Hungary or France. So it's like totally a different region, right? So it's like bringing all of these together. So including much more complexities, but also bringing more opportunities and making it more fun, I would say. So it's a never dying topic of interest for me. So that's
It is quite a rabbit hole, this energy markets.
yeah, absolutely.
One question that popped up now in my mind while you were speaking, you told about engaging, of course, with all these market participants. You are at Montel. Montel has all their knowledge, their data services. But who are the parties that you support most? Because since you are an expert, you have a lot of insight and understanding. Of course, there are the traders, but you also have utilities. The TSOs might also really have interest in your standpoint of your view. Policymakers. Who is
Yeah.
it that you, Priyanka, serve most?
So I would say it's really a balance with all, but looking at the short-term market, it's directly. So if we talk about the customer base of the platforms that we are working very much on, like from my role, more short-term markets like Enapsis, for example, it's more for the traders, I would say, and analysts, like quantitative analysts, portfolio managers, who are more like actively looking at the market, what's happening in the next few minutes or hours. So I would say that is the kind of market participant group which we are talking the most with. But naturally, that also includes having close contact with the TSOs because they are creating a lot of these rules that impact what we see in the market. And we also constantly need to, let's say, develop our tools to cater to the needs of the market, of what's happening. So that is also one of the reasons why market participants trust us so much because we are always very up to date and on our toes to be able to update the things. So I'll give you an example. So about a year ago, Nordic balancing market went through a big change. It was almost like a big bang for the Nordic market, right? So that's been also a motivation to develop our tools very much in proportion to the changes. So that's why this is like a very close interaction with the TSOs that has made this possible. Then market operators, again, when we talk about like 15-minute products, what is that going to be? Because we also get a lot of data from actually the market, like power exchanges. So it's very important for us to be in talks with them from time to time. Also, be very closely looking at the market rules from the regulators. So it's also, I would say, a bit more mix, but like in terms of the support, it's directly to the traders in the market, like in my role. And then everything else is like more collaboration or talking with other entities as well in the market. Yes.
And the massive change that you referred to, I think, is also the PICASSO, right?
Yes, that's correct. So PICASSO, but also mFRR. So manual frequency restoration reserve, that's another reserve which is quite important from the Nordic point of view. And that is a change that happened in March, where this activation, which the Nordic TSOs do, was changed to automated clearing. Earlier, it was a manual clearing, and this is a first step to join MARI, which is a pan-European mFRR market. So it's like an equivalent of PICASSO. So PICASSO is more for the aFRR. So it's the annual automatic frequency restoration reserve. And MARI is more for the manual frequency restoration reserve. So it's very important for Nordic point of view because of the way the market is set up and the volumes are quite large in mFRR. So I was referring to that change, but you're right. It's also PICASSO. PICASSO is more for Denmark and Finland right now. So it's just two countries. Sweden and Norway will join later from the Nordics. Yeah.
Thank you. So when we zoom out over the last years, by had 4 or 5 years, we had, of course, the implementation of the flow-based market coupling as a first big change in the Scandinavian markets, where all the
Yeah.
cross-border capacity allocation and allocated flows were optimized by the 𝐜𝐴𝐴 algorithm.
Yeah.
That was phase one or step one, and on top of
Yeah.
that, we have the MARI integration and PICASSO. I think, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that the MARI integration is not yet taken place. That's for later. So I was just referring that the first step that we have taken in March 2025. So that was the first step to go towards automated trade clearing of the mFRR market. And that has made us prepared. So the algorithm which is used by MARI, so this is like a similar copy of that, but just at the Nordic level. And then the next step would be to join MARI, the pan-European market. But the idea was to do it in stages, to first just get it correct or at the Nordic level. Because as I mentioned, so the total like volumes that are activated for the mFRR type of reserve is quite large for Nordics. So they wanted to do it correct. And actually, it's been a long journey. I would say it has been an evolving process. Also, the way the TSOs have learned from the experience in the market, interaction with the market participants. There have been several volatile prices and spikes in the imbalance prices as a result of this change. So the TSOs have been trying to update the algorithm as they get closer to Mari. So I would say we are now a step closer, but we are not there yet with the full integration.
And just for the audience, not everyone might be as familiar with all these details. So can we take a few minutes to zoom out and describe, and maybe you can assist me here, Priyanka. So we basically have the FCR markets, we have
Yes.
the aFFR markets, we have the
Yes.
mFFR markets, and then we have the RR
Yeah.
markets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you shortly explain in a few minutes' time what are these markets, what
Yes.
are the time frames, and also looking at, let's say, physical imbalance settlement prices, which one have the most or the largest role?
Yeah, yeah. That's actually a very important question because FCR is more like a primary reserve. So it's the first one to respond. So it's like the frequency containment reserve, right? So it's going to be just monitoring the frequency, and there are some ranges of frequency where this is going to be at like an immediate response that the system needs to be able to survive any fall. So it's if there's a drop in frequency, it will just kick in and then it will contain the frequency there. But the idea is that you also need to bring it back to the normal level. So automated frequency restoration reserve is the secondary reserve, I would say here. So it will respond after these deviation to bring it back to the nominal level of 50 Hz, right? So it's important for the secure operation, but it also is faster compared to the manual frequency restoration reserve, which is the next one in the queue. So it's going to be basically to be able to relieve the aFRR resources so that they are available in case there is any next incidence happens. So it's relieving the aFRR from its duty, and it's just taking a little bit longer to respond. That is okay. That is the manual frequency restoration reserve. So that is the third one. And replacement reserve is the one that is coming afterwards, but I would say it's not so common everywhere. And the first three are the most important ones. So this is like a very brief explanation of those. And there are different markets set up. And to your question of which one has the most impact on the imbalance prices, I would say it's very different countries. So it all depends on the market design mechanisms that are set up by the TSO. So that's why I think like this kind of interaction that we have with the TSOs is very important for us to understand what are their rules, what are the market designs, and how are they evolving. Because now with let's say in Nordics, we have both PICASSO and in some countries, and also there is this mFRR. So there is a way to include both of them. And this way has been, there are discussions of how this would change and this could change. So what is the best way? Because the TSOs also want to ensure that they don't have any under coverage or over coverage with the imbalance prices that they set up and the prices they have to pay for the PICASSO, because PICASSO is ultimately a TSO platform. So the BSPs and BRPs who are participating are through the TSOs. They only have access to the national TSO, and the TSO is going to the platform at the European level. So there's a bit of differences here.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that PICASSO as a platform is a TSO platform only, where BRPs and BSPs have no access. They access it basically via the
Via the
direct access.
TSO. Exactly.
So you explained the FCRs, that is basically in seconds, and then you have your aFFR, the automatic one, and mFFR, the manual one, which is in the first, let's say, 15 minutes or so. Can you just explain to the audience on how do market participants interact in these markets? FCR markets are basically more bilateral, so to say, while the other ones are more daily bits. Can you walk us through and how does it affect these traders?
Again, these are a bit differently set up depending on where you are. So I will take some references. So FCR is basically, these are usually already cleared the day before, because again, these are insurances for the TSO that, you know, the resources are going to be there for any activation. So you get paid for the capacities. So in Nordics, we have FCRD and FCRN, different types of products, right? So you already get paid for like FCRD, for example, just for being there. But for FCRN, the compensation is a bit different. So you get paid for the capacity. At the same time, if you get an activation, you will also get paid for those activations in real time. So it's like a double, like 2 times you get paid for it. But
Availability
Laishan,
pay and a pay per use, you could say.
yeah, and that is according to the imbalance prices. So that's like one part of the FCR way, right? So in continental Europe, so there's a common FCR auction, which is done. So there are several countries participating in that, and they have a common price for that. So there is just one. So they don't have this segregation between FCRD and FCRN. And this also comes from the fact that Central Europe, so it's like a much larger synchronous area, but Nordics is a smaller synchronous area. So there are like different frequency ranges in which you need to design different products for those. So that's already getting into quite details, right? So for aFRR, when we talk about that, so PICASSO is the energy market for the aFRR, but there's also capacity market in coordination to that in the day, like on D-1, so the day before the real-time delivery. So you also get paid for the capacity if you're clear in the market, and then you can go to the aFRR energy market, which is PICASSO. So in some countries, we also have, let's say for Nordics, mFRR, as I mentioned, is quite important. So we also have mFRR capacity market, and there is so you get paid for that if you get procured by the TSOs, and then you also go to the mFRR energy market. Then you're like obliged to go to the mFRR energy market as well if you're procured. So it's like kind of an insurance for the TSO, so they pay you extra for the capacities. So I would say from a trader point of view, that's the reason we talk a lot about like multi-market optimization. So you need to look at all these different prices. So what kind of money you can make in the capacity markets, because there are again different timings of those. So it gets easily very complicated. Some are cleared before the day ahead market, some are cleared after the day ahead market. So you have different level of information at the time when you are actually allocating your volumes, because there are also obligations on how you send in your volumes. And if you do that, then you have to also keep those volumes reserved in case there is any need for the activation. So you can't just like reuse your volumes many times, right? So that's also some sort of obligations to take into account. So I would say it makes the job a little bit more complicated to make sure that everything is in line. And then it also depends on what kind of asset you have, but also to make sure that you have those like certain volume constraints to take into account. So it gets very complicated for human decision making. So there is a lot of optimization models actually in place for most operators, that they use these type of optimizations to models to make sure that everything is in line and you're doing the best decisions, but you're also respecting all the constraints that you have to and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. Very well explained. What types of parties are active here? If we zoom in on, let's say, the Danish market,
Mhm.
of course, as a BRP, you can have your assets, you can be assetless, but if you want to be active in these aFRR and mFRR markets, you need to
Mhm.
be a BSP, a balancing service provider. But what types of assets is it? Is it large? Is it small? Is it batteries? Is it solar? Is it thermal? Can you try to draft a story here on how could this look day to day for a typical trading house?
Yeah. So actually, these days, I would say there is all sorts of different types of assets who are starting to participate in these markets, because you do see that there is benefit of getting your asset pre-qualified for, let's say, downward regulation, even if you're a renewable producer. And now, because of more controllability that is coming in, you can also do different sorts of things depending on what kind of flexibility you have got. And because you see a lot of, let's say, co-located assets, right, with batteries and renewables, then it opens up much more opportunities for you to do like a more combined participation. So we are seeing all sorts of, even wind actually, wind in Denmark, for example, is participating in many of these markets quite a lot. So as I mean, it all depends on what kind of opportunities you see, but we are if we go back in time, let's say in 2025, early 2025, if we were having this discussion, we would see more limited, let's say for a PICASSO, if we talk about that, like so aFRR volumes, because Denmark had a very new, immature market for PICASSO back then. I mean, it was very new thing. So the aFRR volumes were quite limited, especially on both the sides, but also on the upward side quite a lot. And now we have started to see more volumes coming in with time, because that's where they see the opportunity. So I would say that more types of assets will get qualified as they see more opportunities into those markets. And as it becomes also more easier, so the pre-qualification processes, they need to be also more, let's say, flexible. And there's actually a lot of now discussion happening with ACER, because with, for example, in terms of PICASSO coming in and opening up the cross-border opportunities. So let's say your asset is in Denmark, but if it is, activated in an uncongested area with another country, so it is basically also helping another country for the activations that they need. So this is the idea of PICASSO, right? So as a result, the natural question we have to ask is the kind of rules that this asset followed to be able to get here, was that the same if you were in Denmark or if you were in Germany, let's say? And in many cases, it is not, because there are local TSO rules to get pre-qualified and so on. So now ACER is looking at ways to harmonize this in a way, and there are also so they ran a consultation, and now they're also going to release like some decisions after collecting all the different feedbacks. So that is the thing we are awaiting in June, for example, 2026. So we would hear more about what was the decisions on these type of ways to harmonize the rules to give like a level playing field for assets who are trying to enter the market. So one more example is, let's say you have an asset which was already qualified in a given like load frequency control area, but now you're trying to switch the same BSP. So the balance service provider is trying to switch to another reserve providing unit. So if, as long as it's of the same technology and same type, you should be able to switch to the new one and do like an ex post verification, so that we don't lose volume suddenly if there is a switch that is happening. So to streamline the process a bit. So these are also some discussions in the background.
And so you basically said that the PICASSO algorithm now allowed the market to have more cross-border optimization of these ancillary services, correct?
Yeah, of the reserves, the aFRR reserve, the
Yeah,
automated
specifically
frequency
aFRR, mFRR. Yeah,
reserve.
ancillary service is wider than that, of course, but I refer to these. Yeah. Can you then
Exactly.
explain as well that with the integration of PICASSO in the Nordics, how was it, and we take a bit a step back in time, but how was
Yeah.
it perceived by the market? And can you explain also what happened in the market that caused concern or discussion?
Yeah, sure. A very interesting question, I would say. So I can answer this in let's say 2, 3 different dimensions, because there's just so much to it. So let's start with Denmark. So Denmark joined PICASSO October 2024, but as I mentioned, it was a very immature market that time with the aFRR, because that was the first time they ever started an aFRR energy market. So there was no aFRR energy market before, right? And usually when you start a new market, there's going to be more volatility in the market, and it's like the market is trying to adjust to the new change. In Finland, they did it a bit differently. So they started, so Fingrid, even before they joined PICASSO, they launched a local aFRR energy market in June 2024. So it gave the market some more time to, let's say, adjust to the new ways of handling this. So they entered this in stages. And what happened was they started to reflect, so they adjusted the imbalance price design already that time for including both aFRR energy and also mFRR energy prices into it in a way, certain way, which is also actually followed today, looking at the dominating directions and doing like a max or min function of the imbalance prices. But what EnergyNet did was, so when they started this in October 2024, they did not use this formula directly because they saw that, oh wait, let's actually reflect on this. What is happening, you know? So the imbalance prices will go crazy if we start counting the aFRR directly from day one. So let's hold on. So EnergyNet started to absorb these costs for themselves and instead shielded the market from uh, having these imbalanced prices reflected to them directly up until March 2025. So that's the time when they shifted to the real formula, which is also what is used in Finland, which is the way they have set it up to be. So now it's almost a year, right? So the kind of there was still shock in the market because everybody could see the prices that were coming out. So the cross-border marginal prices, which are 4 seconds, because it's a 4 second clearing market, right? So you get Picasso prices those many times. And then what is more interesting is the VWAP, the volume weighted average prices of 15 minutes, because ultimately the market will pay the imbalance prices, I mean, get paid or pay according to the 15-minute prices. So that is the one they need to look at. And then we started calculating all of those, trying to reflect how is it reaching out to the BRPs, what does the prices mean? So the reaction was a little bit like taking it a bit more carefully because there's a big change, and how should we adjust to that? But also, if you see, since this question was a little bit more from Nordic perspective, I would say that there was like a doubling effect because there was also this change of mFRR, EAM, Energy Activation Market, in March. And so there were like a lot of changes that were coming along at the same time, and the flow-based had just happened in October 2024. So which also meant much less cross-border capacities up to the real time. And when we're talking about Picasso, that is really, just so close to the real time. So we are struggling with capacities, and it's also making you like more susceptible to very high prices. Because if you look at Denmark, so DK1, DK2 are relatively smaller bidding zones. And if you are isolated, so there were several times that we were seeing the Picasso prices were reaching like 4,000, 5,000 euros. So those were the ranges, like plus, but also sometimes minus. And when you have those volatile prices, it's basically indicating that, first of all, your merit order depth is limited. Second, you're also like very maybe isolated in these cases. So you're kind of on your own. So those were the reactions that we got, like to be a bit more, careful on what's the opportunity. But it also triggered, let's say, more um, participants to get involved in those because they saw that there was opportunity if they were there and they were taking the right decision. But it also made them a bit more careful, I would say. So it's like a bit of mixed reaction. And then many things have followed after that, with the TSOs learning from this and doing more like elastic, like demand threshold kind of thing. So what EnergyNet has started to do is more actively, actually now from October, but they already introduced this officially in August 2025, to modulate the price threshold. So it's kind of you can call it like a temporary price cap in a way. So depending on how much volumes you have, you kind of say that this is the price threshold that I'm willing to let the cross-border marginal price to be for Denmark, for DK1, DK2. So those were some like, reactions that we have seen eventually.
Yeah. And then this is no finger pointing at all, but if we look back, could we say that something went wrong? I mean, there's many things happening at the same time. You mentioned, all the events that you mentioned, basically. While
Yeah.
in some way the market maybe wasn't ready, then the introduction of Picasso for European harmonization, which is great by itself. But then again, we have this island forming and extreme prices.
Mhm.
Was the market ready? Was the system ready? Were the market participants ready? Or is the answer no one was ready? What how to put it?
Um, it's so difficult to say like just one thing, because I think it's like you have to do it at some point. But yeah, the market slowly got ready. I mean, there were like some shadow runs, like parallel runs that were done. So people had a little bit of idea, but it wasn't so much information really. So I think it was a lot to deal with back then, if you look from a market participant's point of view. lot of things happening at the same time. So everybody's trying to learn in the market, right? And this it was the same for the TSOs, I would say, because it's so tough to know already beforehand what is going to be the impact of any change that you do. That's why I think getting involved in the stakeholder meetings is what I would recommend to the market participants. So one of the things that they did, at least for the mFRR change, was to introduce like a deadband of 25 megawatt plus minus 25 megawatts to not have so many market time units with a dominating direction, which means like um, there was always oscillation. So you would either see the system to be upregulating or downregulating. That means the imbalance prices will be very susceptible to getting one of these prices. Instead, if we have like more flat imbalance prices where you get equal to the spot prices. So these type of things were being discussed quite a lot. And in June 2025, they actually did these changes. So I would say, yeah, back then there were maybe a lot of things that were unknown. And then with time, uh, yeah, the market has learned. So I think it was also like a bit of early movers market. So the one who was prepared could really make use of those opportunities that were there. But it's as it is like with everything, right? That many people start to learn the strategies, and I think anybody who's active in quantitative methods and quantitative trading, so they would know this very well that there is like some trading strategies that work today. The math is very good, but because many others have figured that out, it may not work in the future. So there's nothing wrong with the math. It's just the strategy doesn't work. So it's just like that, right? So if more people figure out the opportunities, then the opportunity is gone, kind of. So I would say it was a bit of that. So it's really the advantage for those who were prepared, but I wouldn't say everybody. But yeah,
So
some were not.
if we would say that the market before this whole integration was in some sort of steady state, it got an enormous shock. Market participants adjusted and learned. Would you say now that we are now in a steady state, or are we still drifting and learning?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of scope of improvements. And the learning curve is still, I mean, steep. Maybe it will get flat at some point, but I would say that the more data we have, the more we can learn, really. And that's something we are struggling with. In terms of the data transparency. So some things that are good actually with PICASSO from Denmark point of view, we are actually able to get all the merit order curves for the aFRR, which even at bidding zone level, which is not yet the case for mFRR market, for example. So like these type of things, we are able to do more things with, and we are able to learn. But we are not yet clear with what kind of cross-border capacities are used. So the granularity of the data is just not good enough with the hub-to-hub capacities being still hourly. But these markets are much more granular. So we would like to know more about what type of capacities were really used, to understand and learn better about the interaction of cross-border, um, uh, yeah, like merit order curves. Because as I mentioned, you are not just now looking at, let's say, DK1, but you're also looking at every other merit order curve, which has the possibility to form a common merit order curve with your bidding zone. So that is of interest to me today in the market. And the more information I have about this, the better things I can do. There's another challenge with the data transparency in terms of the netting and the volume exchanged. So those are not very clear. So these are like a bit more mixed up because these are done in different steps, and it's difficult to figure out like which volume was netted or exchanged. So if we do like, yeah, more of these transparent sharing of data from the TSOs to the market participants, the better we can get with our learning.
And to just try to make an analogy here, when looking at the
Mhm.
day-ahead markets, we have, of course, a pretty professional and extended platform with the whole flow-based market coupling 𝐜𝐴 data sources. There
Yeah,
you can see what your allocated capacity on the day-ahead market cross borders are, and then you know at
yeah.
least that a piece of the price in Denmark was set by imports from Germany, for example. It is that
Mhm.
kind of information that's not to the full extent yet available then on the aFRR, mFRR markets.
Yeah, that's true. So for these real-time balancing markets, actually, we still have the old ATC method. So it's not the flow-based method, right? So it's still a bit more simplified. So we get these hub-to-hub capacities data, which kind of act as a proxy, but the granularity of those data is still a problem. So yeah, if it's coming from 𝐜𝐴, or if it's coming from other sources, from TSOs, wherever they can share it, that will be actually a great help for us to be able to understand better, especially the now with more integrated markets on this balancing level. What kind of correlation do I have in Denmark or in Germany with somebody in, I don't know, yeah, another bidding zone like France, or to understand this better. That would open up a lot of opportunities for us to learn the market more.
And what do you think is the delay factor on this data transparency? I mean, it's a very complex market that we live in, of course. There's many different parties,
Mhm.
many different data structures. But do you know if all the TSOs and other parties that can help in this data transparency, are they aware of the need for this data? Who is working on improving this data transparency? And what is the blocker? Do you have any idea?
Mm. Oh, well, actually, so it's also several questions. I would say it's difficult when it's so many entities involved, really, because what we're really struggling for is to get like harmonization here with all the rules. So this just starts with data transparency, but I would say the problem doesn't really end here. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? So first of all, we have to be able to get everybody on board that they need to share it, and it's very difficult. Even within Nordics, if you see, it's just four TSOs, and still it's difficult to get them on the same page. So I wouldn't be like so it's we have different type level of transparency that we see in one country versus the other. All right. So, and then when we're talking about 18 countries which are live today in PICASSO, then it's a different game altogether, right? So it's difficult. But I wouldn't pinpoint one versus the other, but this is just one thing. But if you look at the next thing of that, like how are you going to use this data? So one of the other questions for us is once you get the cross-border marginal prices from PICASSO, right? So how is this reflected or translated to your imbalance prices? So this is a function of the imbalance pricing methodology, like the market design itself, which are decided by local TSOs, which are very different in different countries, right? So every TSO that you name, almost they would have different methodologies of transferring this. But the question here is that why is it important for us to know the way they translate is because again it influences the intraday trading. So how do you trade in intraday? How do you come up with your strategies? You're going to constantly look at your expectations of the future. And for them, the future stage is actually the imbalance pricing. Now, the imbalance pricing is a translation of these type of like PICASSO prices and so on. But the way this is translated is very different in one country versus the other. So the way this will impact me in Denmark would be different than how it will impact me in France, for example, right? So, but we are also trading cross-border in intraday. So we are also having this SIDC platform where we are trading cross-border. So you see, it all multiplies here. So the even though the markets are getting closer, but the connection between the intraday and the yeah, the way you would know about the imbalance pricing, this connection is getting more and more complicated. So that's where this topic of data transparency and also the rules of setting imbalance pricing. So the more harmonized we are, the more transparent we are, I think the more opportunities it will open and bring us on level playing field. So yeah, it's just many things involved in
And
altogether.
just checking in, Priyanka, if this is a gap in my understanding or in public information, is it
Mhm.
correct to say that the cross-border marginal pricing calculation implied by the PICASSO algorithm is not publicly clearly translated in how it affects the physical imbalance settlement price of both sides on the border?
Uh, so, well, so what you would get actually from PICASSO algorithm is actually the cross-border marginal prices, right? So which are 4 seconds. Now, when I mentioned that we would look at the 15-minute VWAPs of this, so that's a That's the first step. But the way you would process this further, so I can give you an example of how this is done in Denmark or in Nordics, is that you look at the dominating direction of the market. If your aFRR activation is the same way, so the dominating direction is decided by the mFRR. And if it's aligned with the aFRR activation, only then PICASSO prices will play a role in setting the imbalance prices. Otherwise, they won't. So that's like one way of translating it. So it is actually, you wouldn't really know for sure just by looking at the CBMPs if your market is, long or short or whatever. So it's much more other factors also playing in, because then it's different in if you go to continental Europe, because mFRR is not a major thing there. You would look at IGCC, you would look at aFRR, like activations and so on. So the methodologies are very different. That's why the translation is, I mean, depending on
Challenging.
where, yeah, and depending on where was this activated and for whom and so on. So that's also something we need to know more. So what was the that's why I said the difference between the netting and exchanges, and also what was the need, first of all, the local demand versus the activation. So if we can get like a visibility of that, that is also very good, because often maybe you might be activated. It all depends on your merit order curve in the market of the uncongested area. So if you have a more, let's say, flatter merit order curve, you're more likely to get activated. If you're in the uncongested area. So you would do like the heavyweight lifting for the others, in a way, so to say, right? So you are actually, if you just look at the activations, you can't say for sure, like if it was for your local needs or it was for helping your neighbors. So that's why it's also like, and sometimes you might get a very high cross-border marginal price, even though your local merit order was not showing that, but it's actually coupled from somewhere else. You just got it along because you were there in the uncongested area. So it is also that, right? So it's a bit more complicated with this.
And this brings us to two other, I think, interesting questions. First one
Mhm.
would be, and this is one step back towards the Denmark example that you gave. And I just had in mind, you
Yeah.
have speculators, assetless traders, and you also have the asset owners, of course, who have a major role in this whole pricing of the imbalance market. Do you think, in the case of the Danish market, but also more international, is there a clear winner or loser? Does a trader benefit more? Does an asset owner benefit more? Or is it really impossible to say?
I would say anybody who has a very good view of the future and can do something about it is the winner. Um, so the better your forecasts are, because as I have mentioned, many different factors playing in a role, and those who are able to come up with sophisticated models to be able to forecast this ahead of time and to do something about it while there is still opportunity and time, which is most likely in intraday markets. Let's say you can position yourself accordingly, or just close your position at the right time, or if you expect, some spike, how can you make use of that? So it's all going to be the winner is going to be decided by that, like all the factors that I mentioned,
Yeah, yeah.
the
Okay, thank
the
you. Yeah.
information, and yeah.
And one of the other elements that you mentioned, which brings me to the next question, was that if there's any activation or cross-border activation, what happened? Was it to help your own system or your neighbor system? That, in my mind, throws up the topic of, let's say, Poland and Italy, where there was, of course, a bit more noise about whole PICASSO
Mm,
integration, extreme
mm,
pricing, and the questions on what is this system doing and how is it affecting us? Can you try to explain in simple terms
yeah.
what happened there, and was it
Mm,
beneficial for the local market or for Europe as a whole?
mhm.
What was the case?
I think so there, what well, Italy joined, then left, and then joined again. So it's been a bit of a journey for them, and also for Poland. So I would say it's all about really your habits, like what are you used to, right? If there is some surprises that are thrown in, which you have not been used to for your history, then it's going to be alarming for you to like, oh, what's happening? And these kind of prices we have not seen before. But if you look at some other countries in Central Europe, they were already used to some, like, let's say, high prices and spikes and so on. So they were not as surprised as, let's say, Italy, because it came to them as a surprise, or for Poland, for example. So I would say their reaction was natural based on their experiences and what kind of things that they were aware of or used to. But now when Italy has re-entered, I can say that they have, managed to, let's say, at least be a bit more careful, especially this elastic demand threshold that I mentioned. So they are also one of the few TSOs in PICASSO right now who are actively also, sending in those thresholds. So they are now more careful after they joined back in November 2025. So this time they're doing it a bit differently, I would say. But yeah, it's all about being used to it, seeing different things, and what can you do about it? How can you adapt? It's all about that, I would say.
Thank you for sharing that, Priyanka.
Mhm.
When we look ahead on these European balancing markets,
Yeah.
apart from the data transparency, where you said that is a massively important point, that we just get more data and better data, what do
Mhm.
you think is the most important challenge that needs to be tackled from a pan-European view to make
Mhm.
these markets just more transparent and efficient?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say, to make them more efficient and in a way more successful, I would say trust is the biggest word here, because the more you trust in the market, the more you are in for less surprises because you start to believe in what's happening, right? So if there is more transparency also in the way the algorithm works, we understand this, start to understand this better, it will make it more successful, right? So if we start to also see more volumes coming in into the market, more integration happening, so it will bring again understanding what are the fundamental drivers behind each of these countries that are joining, the new ones, and how will that affect the common merit order list. It's all about understanding where do you lie in that common merit order list and whom are you connected to. So the more you start to understand this, the more people will be in for less surprises. So it will be, let's say, more building more trust and bringing more clarity to the market. So this will be a new thing, bringing more level playing fields, as I mentioned. Like now that ACER is looking into some of these topics and giving more clarity to the BSPs in the future, like this year. That will be the next thing we would look for, and also the way you translate these prices to the local, like imbalance prices, right? So those kind of topics are also going to be quite important to look after, to make it also level playing field. Yeah.
And is it fair to say that, of course, with more trust, more cooperation, and improvement of these systems, that simply having more market participants, more assets, and more volume on these curves, would that also absorb all the price spikes and make the market more efficient?
That's tough to say because it also depends on the bidding behavior, naturally, and who is behind those bidding curves, right? If you start to see, let's say, more energy storages, they will bid based on their opportunity costs, and it's more difficult with those type of ways to see how will they place their bids and so on. So it is, yeah, a bit tough to say exactly where. This will land us, and I can't promise you that it will take away all the volatility and so on. But yeah, it will be something to definitely to see. And the more we know the market, the more clarity we have and data, the more we can answer this question for sure.
Thank you, Priyanka. And I think also hearing about all the complexities in this market, thank you to all these people involved in these super advanced systems and trying to make our European power system a more efficient and robust system. I mean, it's super complex, super challenging. You
Yeah.
have thrown me a bit around with all your information and complexity. But for those who are, of course, other experts in this market, I'm sure they have enjoyed this conversation. Looking ahead for parties who are entering this space,
Mhm.
do you have maybe some insights on if you enter this physical space, aFFR, mFRR, assets
Mhm.
activation, what would be your
Yeah.
advice? Where should a party that enters this market, where should they start in this maze?
So first of all, I would say try to better understand the um, underlying like fuel mix, because that's what is going to set the prices ultimately. So having a good understanding of your own local market wherever you are starting, and also of your neighbors is first of all very important, and having good understanding of how this reflects to, let's say, the imbalance prices, or which are quite important for the short-term trading at least. So this will be very important, and also to stay updated with the changes in these market rules. That is quite important for you. And last but not the least, having good view of what's coming in the upcoming hours. So having good forecasts of these volume balancing volume forecast and balancing prices. That is quite important. So yeah, I know some people who can help you with that. So feel free to
And
get in touch.
I'm sure that Montel has some data sources and platforms here to assist the traders in getting up and running. Yeah.
Absolutely,
And as
yes.
part of this Montel series, we are also, of course, speaking with Jean-Paul Harremans from Enapsis, who is one of the other experts in this field.
Yes. Hmm.
We see, of course, over the last years, the whole wave of algo traders, more artificial intelligence. And I'm
Yeah.
no expert at this topic, but you could say AI does not really know what it knows. It's just good in predicting directions or opportunity or
Hmm.
likelihood. Um,
Hmm.
would you say that being active in these physical assets driven markets with AI
Hmm.
strategy, does it make sense, or is this fundamental understanding really important to more fundamentally model
Mm.
rather than in some statistical likelihood way as AI does?
I would say it's actually mix of both, really. Because you can't, I would say don't put all your eggs in one basket,
Yeah.
in a summary, because
Fair enough. Yeah.
if you go too much with AI, you would miss out on these kind of the regulation changes that I've mentioned. So AI will only do as good of a job as the data you're sending in, and if the data is actually coming in from a different market design, then you will have to adapt your models to that also, right? So and then there'll be different factors that will be starting to play a role. So how would you know that? So I think it's a combination of both. So having understanding of the market, and also I'm not really ruling out the importance of AI, of course. It's also doing its job, and that's also important for us to learn from the patterns and so on. But also being able to understand what's going deep within is important, because at some point you might get a question like, why did you take this decision, and what did AI really process, so to be able to like back engineer, like backtrack what really happened there. So there's a little bit of, yeah, more market depth, understanding, knowledge that is going to play a role. So this, we can't let go of that really. Both,
So
I would say.
you could argue there that AI-driven intraday strategies fine so far, but whenever it's about ancillary services, frequency reservations, then purely AI might be a bit too much of a long shot.
Yeah, I would say actually for almost everything, you have to be more vigilant and careful of the changes,
Yeah, true.
definitely, because all the market rules change in one place. It impacts everything, the whole trading cycle. So even intraday, because the intraday, as I mentioned, you would do a lot of trading based on your expectation for the imbalance prices. But if there is any change happening there in the balancing market or the market design rules, then it will impact the drivers, the main drivers for your training, and then the trading strategies itself.
And I think this is just a very important warning for those who are entering the field without any energy knowledge and any fundamental knowledge. Know your
Mhm.
stuff, do your research, do your reading, because it's more about
Yeah,
than just the numbers.
exactly. Absolutely.
Thank you very much for today, Priyanka. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. So much expertise available, and thank you for sharing it with our audience today. And for those who want to have a follow-up conversation with you, of course, they are welcome to reach out to you.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I'm very happy to talk about these topics anytime.